next to the explosive events that happened in Israel on 7 October, the other thing that everybody's been waiting for and to watch is to find out what is going to happen with Hezbollah in Lebanon. Are they going to open up a second front in the war against Israel to go along with the fight that they're having in the Gaza Strip right now? Now, there's been many statements from some Hezbollah leaders and some people associated with the movement, but there hadn't been any comments from the actual head of the organization. His name was Hassan Nasrallah. Now, there was a couple of days ago, they announced that he was going to make a major speech today on the 3rd of November. And many commentators noted that before the 2006 war, he made a similar speech, and that kind of presaged a big war that broke out between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon. So there was a lot of concern about what would happen with that. Israel saying that their forces were ready, and the Hezbollah themselves had been positioned along the front lines, and there was some concern that he may say something explosive. And then, of course, the worry is, what if he moved next? So when the speech happened this morning, there was lots of focus on it, and I want to point out just a couple of things to you that he had to say. First, there was this.
This glorious, blessed, large-scale operation was 100% Palestinian in terms of decision and execution. 100% Palestinian.
Okay, that was probably made a lot of people breathe a sigh of relief when he first said that, because he had just been in Qatar and had lots of conversations and communications with senior Iranian government members. I think both the IRGC, possibly even their Minister of Defense, Minister of Foreign Affairs, high-level people. So the idea that he went from there to make this speech back in Lebanon, there was a lot of concern with what was Iran going to do, because that's the issue. Since Hezbollah is mainly funded by Iran, and many consider them just an offshoot of Iran, if Hezbollah does something, there'll be a lot of worry about what's going to come next with Iran, and will this presage a wider war? The fact that he's led off and talked right away that this attack that Hamas did was not Iranian, it was not Hezbollah. In fact, he went on to say that they didn't know anything about it. He said, "No, didn't get my feelings hurt." I'm paraphrasing, of course. He said, "I didn't get my feelings hurt because it was a paramount importance for operational security so that they could catch Israel off guard." And man, that was their deal. So he just emphasized several times throughout that speech that this was their thing. It's the Palestinians alone. It's not us. It's not Iran. So don't spread the word. Now, that's a good news, because that means, at least as of right now, the chances of a second front being opened up against Israel is quite small. And the risk of this war blowing beyond the borders of Gaza is also not as big as we thought it might have been, at least not right now. Now, things are dynamic and they can change. Now, one other thing he said, which was also noteworthy, kind of along the same lines, is, well, I'll just let you watch. Go ahead.
To the enemy, we say, if you think to assault Lebanon or take a preemptive strike against Lebanon, it will be the biggest act of foolness in the history of your existence.
Now, I think that one was more directed toward the domestic audience. So if the first one was directed toward the United States and Israel, that, hey, don't go to war with us, don't go to war with Iran, because we didn't have anything to do with it. This one was for the domestic audience. And you saw that how they were cheered and whatever, because see, they've been under a lot of pressure already among many in the Arab world because of all these Palestinian civilian casualties, which have just been stratospheric. Apparently up over 9,000 civilians who have been killed in here. And that's a separate issue that we'll discuss here in a moment. But there's been, because of that, lots of pressure. We've been talking in previous deep dives about the issues in Turkey. We've been talking about the problems in Egypt, in Jordan, in Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, Qatar. Several of the countries have actually broken one country has broken diplomatic ties with Israel. Several others have now recalled their ambassadors. So there is some issue. Lots of pressure among some of those groups on Hezbollah. They're saying, hey, you guys are the ones that are in position to do something about this. So you always talk about defending the rights of the Palestinian people. Now's your chance. Go ahead and launch this war. He doesn't want to launch a war, Nasrallah, because he doesn't want to come in the crosshairs of potentially both the IDF and the United States. But he also has to placate that domestic pressure. So you saw how just emphatic he was and angry, and and stressing his words, and his face was all contorted, saying, "Don't attack us, because if you do, that's going to be the biggest mistake of your life." We're not going to attack him. Nobody's going to launch an attack into Lebanon against Hezbollah, because Israel doesn't want to start its own second front, which unnecessarily, because once you do attack them, if it's unprovoked, now you do have a second front war, because then they don't have no choice but to respond. So that's the good news for the West, is that at least as of the moment, that's not going to, there doesn't appear that there's going to be a second front. Now, there's some caveats that go along with that. Number one, in wartime, as we have seen most graphically for now 21 months in the Russia-Ukraine war, all war is based on deception. Everybody's messaging things left and right. They're using outright misinformation, saying things that aren't true. They're saying disinformation and kind of mixing truth with untruth to make the public opinion believe that their side is right. And so that's going on here too. Everybody does it. It's a normal part of war. It's always hard for people to distinguish what's true, what's not, which is one of the reasons we have Deep Dive. That's why we come here, to try to shed some light onto you about what's really going on besides the rhetoric that's happening. That's what we're going to do right here. So for Hezbollah, they have to placate the domestic pressure. And so that has resulted so far in kind of an understanding, I think, between the Israeli Defense Forces and the Hamas side, in that there is local fighting going on around the border region. That's the reason you may have heard early on that the Israelis required 150,000, I believe, civilians to vacate a strip of several kilometers, I think, from the northern border, was they got them out of there so that they would not be attacked. And you see, Gary, if we can bring that map up here, which shows the northern border between Israel and Lebanon, where Hezbollah is, and you see these triangles and these red areas there. Those are attacks that are going back and forth. I believe there was 19 attacks in the last 24 hours on November 2nd. This is according to the Institute for the Study of War. They have some great products to show what's happening here. That thatched area you see there, the blue, that's the evacuation zone. So that's where the people are no longer sitting. And the Israelis have to sit there, so that these strikes are basically falling either on empty land, or they're falling on houses that are not occupied. And Israel also retaliates back in there. Interesting also, Nasrallah mentioned that they had actually suffered 57 killed in action. So he actually put how many of their side had died in the process. But there seems to be a general agreement between the two sides that this is what we're going to do. You're going to hit us a little, we're going to hit you a little, but we're going to keep it limited. Hezbollah has not fired deeper into Israel, because that would spark a much stronger retaliation. It's, in a weird way, it's kind of an understandable dance between the two. It's just keeping things on a low level. Both sides are telling the other, we know you're there, we're here, but there's rules to this in a weird sort of way. That's what's happening there. Now, I'm also going to show you what's happening in the larger war. Gary, if you could bring up that next map now. This is a larger view. This is what's happened in the northern part of Gaza Strip. And as I can interpret what Israel is doing, and some of what they're saying, is that it looks like they have a strategy they currently have 3 axes of advance. One is in that northwest corner along the coast. The other one is in the northeast corner there in, I believe it's called Bet Hanun, in that corner there, where it's one of the suburbs, basically, that's outside of Gaza City. And then in the south there, you see that there's this blue area. That's with the area of Israeli incursion. And you see they're moving to completely cut off everything from Gaza City south. And what you're going to see with those, I imagine in the coming days, that blue area there on the upper left is probably going to continue to move south until it links up with the blue incursion in the south. And so they completely cut off the coast from Gaza City. They'll have the complete northern part cut off. And then, of course, there's already the border between Israel and the Gaza Strip in the east. So that will be completely severing the entire northern part of Gaza, in the Gaza City, and the Hamas will be cut off from all the supplies. So that will lower the issue of bringing in relief supplies to all the people in the south, because now then there won't be any way for any of that to get up to the Hezbollah in the north. Now, once this happens, I think that what you're going to see is the beginning of, I think probably what we'll see is a methodical plan to just move section by section through that city, and possibly just like a small ring and bring it closer and closer until they end up completely either destroying all of Hamas or they surrender. And the Minister of Defense yesterday actually said, that's your choice, Hamas. You can either fight to the death and we'll kill you, or you can surrender. But that's the only two options that there are. So there is no issues of negotiation, no issues of talking. Nobody wants to, have a ceasefire. The Israelis have been very clear on this. U.S. Secretary of State Blinken is in town trying to get a humanitarian pause. And to be clear, so people understand there's a distinction there. Humanitarian pause is just saying that's for some finite period of time, 8 hours, 12 hours, something like that. We're going to stop all the attacks so that relief supplies can come in, the trucks can come in safely, not get attacked, get rid of their load, and then return back, and then the pause is over. So a lot of people are complaining that no, the Israelis can't do that because that'll just give all these advantages to Hamas. It won't give any advantages. Let me just tell you, tactically speaking, Hamas had months to prepare for this. They have, they stockpiled a lot of, ammunition, other supplies, medical supplies, water, food, all the things they know that they're going to have a siege because they expected Israel to do this. Now that stuff is limited, and now it can't be resupplied as soon as they complete that cordon and completely shut off the southern part of that. But this other issue, the pause, is I think necessary because, look, I'm always concerned about the moral part of it and the humanitarian law part of it first, but there's also a practical issue. If you're just caring about the Israeli military side, Israel requires they must have complete Western support and at least tacit acceptance among the Arab world. Because if the Israelis lose the Western support and primarily the American support, and if the Arabs get too angry, they could have even more enemies, and then they could lose American support. And what would cause something like that? If the casualties got even higher than they are right now, and not just because people died in airstrikes and collateral damage, so-called, but if they actually start starving to death, dying of thirst because they can't get any relief supplies in there, then that's going to cause many in America to start saying, okay, hang on, we support Israel, but this is beyond the pale. And that's possible. It's not inconceivable that that could happen, because as much as many people in the United States support Israel for reasonable and understandable reasons, there is a limit to it, because there also is the issue of the Palestinian civilians. Now, these people were as innocent and deserving of life as every Israeli who was murdered by the Hamas terrorists. So it is important, and I think imperative, that Blinken succeed in getting this humanitarian pause so that the people of Palestine, all those innocent civilians now squashed into the southern part of this, get enough food to at least survive. Now, there's other issues we can go about that later, about getting them out of there or providing more sustained long-term support. But for right now, they have to get these supplies in there. And there's so many hospitals already that have already run out of medical supplies and fuel to keep generators on, so they can't even keep some people alive. And many people who should have lived are now dying. And when those images start getting out, that's going to cause more and more trouble for the Israeli side. So again, it's important to reiterate this. It is critical for Israel's support that they allow this humanitarian pause to come in, and it's not going to cost them anything. Now, the last point I want to make here is that the other side of this component, the Hamas side inside. Now, one of the things that the reasons why the Minister of Defense of Israel said that there's no negotiations, you either surrender, quit, is because there is no evidence at all that the Hamas side has any intention of doing anything besides fighting to the death itself. So despite all of this power that Israel has arrayed, despite all of the help that they're getting from around the world, in the United States especially, if anyone thought there was any suggestion that the Hamas leadership may have said, oh, shoot, we miscalculated, we may be needed to talk some kind of surrender or maybe a negotiation perhaps. Here's what one of the leaders of Hamas had to say just yesterday.
إنه إسرائيل لازم نأدبها وحنأدبها مرة ثانية وثالثة. إسرائيل دولة لا مقام لها على أرضنا. إحنا الدولة لابد أن نزيلها، لأنه بالفعل هي تعتبر كارثة أمنية وعسكرية وسياسية للأمة العربية والإسلامية. يجب أن تنتهي. بالتالي يجب أن ننتهي.
أن ينتهي وين؟
بس
بقطاع غزة؟
ينتهي إلى، لا، بتكلم عن كل الأراضي الفلسطينية.
كل الأراضي الفلسطينية، يعني زوال إسرائيل؟
طبعا. وجود إسرائيل غير منطقي.
You see how casually he says, yeah. I mean, the complete destruction of Israel. Look, in reality, there is no chance that the Hamas fighters are, they're terrorists. They have, homemade rockets, ammunition for rifles, and maybe some IEDs and some anti-tank missiles. That's all they got. And now then they have no support from anywhere else. They have no equipment. They can't get any more supplies, no more ammunition. Whenever they use up what they've got, that's it. So there is zero chance that they're going to actually be able to make good on that. And yet they seem suicidally intent upon even trying. And Gareth, we still have that quote up from that Hamas leader not long ago saying how they actually, this one here, he said, "We've rated our men who love death for the sake of Allah just as much as you, Israel, love life." That was the context of that comment there. And you see that he's making good on this, their leadership. And so that means that Israel is going to have to continue to go house by house, building by building, until either they run out of ammunition, they run out of food and water, or until they're killed, because they will not give up and they're going to continue to fight to the death. And so that's why people need to understand this is not going to be quick. It's not going to be painless. And especially when Israel Defense Force starts getting into the cities with their infantry fighters, and now then their tanks and their armored personnel carriers don't give them as much advantage because they can't take it into the close quarters fighting. This is going to be some pretty high casualty causing activities for the IDF, and that's going to be tough to navigate, and something that Netanyahu's going to have some trouble with as the longer this thing goes. But folks, I don't see any way out of this. Israel can't negotiate. They can't negotiate with terrorists who don't want to negotiate. This has started, and unfortunately, it's going to have to finish. And I am such an advocate of doing everything we can to make sure that those innocent Palestinian civilians who just want to live don't continue to die in such large numbers because they're powerless to do anything else. And I think we need to prioritize their safety and security just as much as we care about the Israeli citizens who also deserve complete safety and security. That's all we have for you today. This is a dynamic situation. Man, there could be surprises around the corner. One thing you can count on with the Daniel Davis Deep Dive is we're going to keep you up to date on what's happening. And just like this, we're going to give the information under the headlines so that you know what's really going on. Thanks. Remember to like and subscribe. Pass around to your friends so that they have access to the same good information you do. And we'll see you next time on Deep Dive.